Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Claudia Gonzalez. Gonzalez was shot and killed on Friday, March 16, 2018, in the 8300 block of South Broadway in the Florence neighborhood of South LA, according to LA County Coroner records. Larry Sierra and Benito Venegas were subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. The victim's family and friends testified for the prosecution regarding defendant's abusive relationship with the victim. The victim's mother described the relationship as very bad. The victim and defendant had a child together. While the victim was pregnant, defendant threatened her, pointing a knife at her stomach because he didn't believe the child was his. After the child was born, defendant's mother and the victim's mother shared joint custody of the child. However, because defendant repeatedly threatened the victim and the victim's mother, telling them to stay away from the child, the victim's mother allowed the child to live with defendant and his mother on 85th Street near Broadway in Los Angeles. The victim's mother testified there was always problems when the victim would try to visit the child, and that defendant would refuse to open the door whenever the victim tried to visit the child. On the day of the murder, the victim told her roommate that she was going to go visit her child near 84th Street and Broadway at defendant and his mother's residence. The victim was found shot to death at a bus stop near 83rd Street and Broadway, approximately 1 block from defendant's residence. Detective Iris Romero recovered a cell phone, a bus token, and a monthly planner near the victim's body. No cartridge casings were found at the scene, suggesting that the casings had been moved or that the murder weapon was a revolver, which does not expel the casings upon being fired. Detective Romero obtained surveillance camera footage from a nearby liquor store and a medical marijuana dispensary. In the surveillance footage, the victim can be seen walking away from the area of the defendant's home at 8:16 p.m. and stopping at the bus stop. Several minutes later, a van with distinctive logos drives past the bus stop where the victim is waiting and parks at the corner of 83rd Street and Broadway. Then, a heavy-set man gets out of the van, approaches the victim, and shoots her in the back. The shooter then runs back to the parked van, which drives off. Investigators identified the logos on the van and determined that the van was connected to a car audio business in Hawthorne. The business owner testified that he had hired both defendant and defendant's cousin, co-defendant Benito Venegas, and that he allowed co-defendant to use the company's van on the weekends so that he could drive it to promote the business. In examining the cell site activity of co-defendant's cell phone on the day of the murder, the data showed that co-defendant called defendant's home at 6:47 p.m. Then co-defendant called defendant again at 8:24 p.m. and 8:27 p.m. from a cell site near the crime scene and defendant's residence. From 8:40 p.m. to 8:42 p.m., co-defendant's cell phone activity moved away from the crime scene and towards co-defendant's residence. Defendant and co-defendant were arrested 3 days after the murder and the van was impounded. In the Perkins operation, Detective Jason Archie placed an undercover agent in the holding cell with co-defendant Venegas and recorded their conversation. After Venegas and the agent spoke for several minutes, Detective Archie told Venegas that he wanted to talk about the victim's murder. At some point during Venegas' conversation with the agent, Detective Archie walked defendant and defendant's younger brother past Venegas' cell so that Venegas and the agent could see them. Venegas told the agent that defendant was his cousin. During their recorded conversation, Venegas admitted to the undercover agent that he picked up defendant on the day of the murder and that defendant directed him where to go. According to Venegas, defendant got out of the car, he ran over there, and I just heard pop, 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 pop. He came running back to the car and we took off. Venegas told the agent that he didn't know what defendant was going to do. When the agent suggested that defendant might be cooperating with law enforcement, Venegas said that if defendant did so, defendant would be greenlit. Following the trial, the jury found defendant guilty of first-degree murder and found the firearm allegation true. The same jury found Venegas not guilty of murder, but found him guilty of being an accessory after the fact. The court sentenced defendant to a prison term of 80 years to life. Claudia Gonzalez was 30 years old at the time of death.